into empathy. And of course, need to know that this is a series that deals with what important relationship skills. And relationship skills are a set of skills that help you to form healthy, happy, and strong connections. In general, relationship skills are any abilities that help you to connect with others, to form bonds, and these could be a broad range of abilities. So I identified 11 that I think are very important, and we could say it's 12 because I put 2 together, right? Number 1, self-awareness, which we dealt with before. Emotional regulation, also did that. Empathy, which I'm doing today. Being vulnerable, number 4. Number 5, controlling anger or anger management, which I put together with emotional regulation. So I would have just finished controlling anger and anger management. And number 6, conflict resolution. Number 7, active listening. 8, talking and listening to each other with openness and respect, especially when we have difficult conversations. Number 9, forgiving. 10, repenting and apologizing. And 11, setting boundaries. So today, as I said, the focus is on empathy, and it will be 2 programs. So in this first program, I am looking at what is empathy. And this is just so important because we could think that we're empathizing and we actually are not. And then in the follow-up to this, I want to look at how do we communicate with empathy, because empathy must be communicated. I can't just say I'm empathizing and you don't even know, feel, hear anything. Again, empathy is one of the most important abilities or skills that help people to understand each other. And you actually cannot have a healthy, intimate relationship without empathy. It is not possible. And that is why even as we're seeing more and more persons on that narcissistic spectrum, you're seeing more and more difficulties, because without empathy, a lot of change cannot happen. People feel unheard, people feel alone, people feel just confused, right? So the basis of emotional closeness in a relationship is empathy. If you sense that your spouse, your friend, your loved one, your parent, your child really feels how it is for you, you feel less stressed, you feel closer, you feel more trusting. I remember when my daughter was going through a hard patch in terms of university, and she called, and you know that time, sometimes you just feel like giving up. And I remember telling my husband, oh, she don't need answers, you know, she doesn't need solutions. What she needs is empathy. She needs us to show her that we understand how she is feeling. And that really, and also prayer did the trick, right? Because we may have wanted to say, well, no, you're nearly finished. Please continue. Work, what is with you? Work hard. Empathy. Empathy was the key, right? But what is empathy? What is empathy? It is the ability to step into the shoes, in inverted commas, of another person with the aim to understand their feelings and perspective, and to use this understanding to guide our actions. And our actions will also include what we say. So it's not just what we do, but also what we say. So we define empathy as a person's ability to step into his friend's, spouse, child, loved one shoes and experience his or her experiences as his own, therefore having a better understanding of the loved one's feelings. Now, this that I'm going to share here is very important. Empathy is not how I would feel if this were happening to me. So it's not okay. You're telling me something and I'm saying this is how I would feel if this were happening to me. That is not empathy. Because the truth about it is that I may actually feel differently. The key is not to step into your loved one's shoes simply to see how you would feel, if you experience the same thing that he or she is experiencing, but rather to focus on what your friend, your child, parent, spouse, loved one is actually feeling. If I were my friend, if I were my loved one with his or her history, strengths, struggles, personality, because many times when we see a situation and then you get more story, you say, oh, I could understand how the person could see it like that. I could understand how the person would feel like that, right? So if I were my loved one with his or her history, strengths, struggles, personality, so you're putting yourself into their shoes to feel what they would feel, right? And here we have to rely on our actual experiences that, the actual things that we feel to be empathetic. And feelings, very important, are universal, and every healthy person has them. Everybody has feelings, even though some of us may appear not to. We all do. And that is why it is so important for us to know how we feel. Because if we don't know how we feel, it is very difficult for us to empathize with others. So, again, why is empathy so important? The Bible commands us to love others and to treat others the way we would want to be treated. And this actually requires empathy and believing that everyone is valuable and priceless. When I don't repress my feelings or emotions and I allow myself to feel or experience them, whatever they are, remember, feelings are neither right nor wrong. You don't tell a person they should or should not feel something, right? What is right or wrong is how we think and how we behave. So when I allow myself to feel, to experience those things, whatever they are, I am able to understand and empathize with others. Very, very critical. So many times we are growing up and we're not in spaces where it's okay for us to feel how we feel. So we learn to bury. We learn not to be in touch with them, right? It doesn't mean we don't have feelings, but it's very important. So for example, you come from work and, you say to your spouse, look, I'm very tired. And this person says, what do you mean you're very tired? All of us working, what do you mean you're tired? What do I have to do with anything, right? Or, well, I am tired too. Now, that generally would be as a result of a person feeling tired, but not truly acknowledging it. So they are unable to truly empathize with you feeling tired and what would be a healthy or empathetic response to somebody saying something like that, right? And we could see if everyone would empathize with each other, the world would be a far better place, right? But most of us, or some of us truly, truly need help, deliverance, serious healing, right? Some of us, but most of us, right, can start right where we are, in our families, with our friends, to learn and to practice empathy, because it's very, very, very important. So the Bible commands us to love others, and you can't love others and treat others the way you want to be treated if you don't have empathy, if you're not feeling for yourself and therefore able to feel for others. Very important for us as parents, and even in teaching our children empathy. One of the things you can do, even as you read to them, and you have stories and you ask them questions like, how do you think? So you have a fox going on a journey and whatever. And you ask, how you think Mr. Fox is feeling? How you think? And get them to express what they think Mr. Fox, Miss Turtle, whoever, Bunny Rabbit, whoever the character is, what you think they're feeling in different situations. It's also important for you to be able to help your children put words to their emotions, which is feelings. Put words to their emotions, because sometimes they may not know, and you can help them with the words because you're able to put yourself in their shoes and imagine what they would be feeling. And that helps them. And even saying, do you feel what you did there to Johnny? How you feel what you did there to Johnny would make him feel? Would you like it if somebody did that to you? You know, things like that. You know, what should you do then? You know, having these kinds of conversations with them, very, very important. Right? Now, six reasons why empathy is very important in relationships and why you should be practicing this skill. So 1, it helps us to have healthy resolution to conflicts. When we have conflicts in intimate relationships, we cannot start with, this is what is logical. We cannot start with, well, the Bible says this and quote a scripture verse. We cannot start with, well, this is how I see it. We must start with empathetic understanding. We must start with understanding how our loved one is feeling. And in having that understanding, we then know what Bible verse to apply. What is the logical thing to do, right? Now, fights can happen between couples, friends, children, and parents because siblings, because they cannot seem to see eye to eye on certain issues. Whether it's something major like discussing finances, right? How we're going to use finances, or something as minor as, well, what some people consider minor because it could be major, taking out the garbage. Putting yourself into your loved one's shoes really helps to bridge the divide, and getting past the differences no longer seem or almost impossible. And you find that anytime you decide, I really want to empathize, I really want to see how this makes a person feel, it really shifts your thinking and your behaviors. Secondly, so we're looking at 6 reasons why empathy is very important in relationships. The first one, it helps us to have healthy resolution to conflicts. And we know how it is when you have a conflict and you just feel this person just doesn't understand. And you know, if you feel somebody just doesn't understand how you're feeling, you really don't want to hear them, you know. You really feel like, okay, I'll just sit here, listen. When they finish talking, I just move on and do what I need to do, right? Secondly, empathy helps you understand your spouse, your friend, your child, your loved one. It helps you to understand them. When you learn to understand with your significant others, you understand how to love them. You know, how much space they need. You understand what your significant others expect of you. Empathy really helps us to understand others. And of course, this is why it is so important for healthy relationships. Number 3, empathy, it helps you to work on your flaws. It helps you to work on your flaws. Another reason why empathy is so important in a relationship is because it teaches both sides that everything is not just about them. Everything is not just about you, right? There are 2 sides to everything, and some people say 3, right? But being in a relationship is no different. It's not just about you. When we empathize with our friends or relatives, spouse, neighbor, you'll be able to see why they get annoyed or upset with you. Put yourself in their shoes. Okay, I could see why this could be upsetting. I could see how this could have made the person feel unloved or disrespected or unheard, right? Even though that may not have been your intention at all. And I think sometimes we while intention is extremely important, we need to understand that our behaviors are impacting others. So don't just look at your intentions. Look at your intentions and look at your behaviors. So while my intention was not to make my daughter feel unheard, that is what my behavior did. So when you empathize, you're able to see, right? And this can bring about nothing but positive change. As seeing the way you behave through the eyes of others will prompt you to work on your flaws and be a better person to them. So once we talk in relationships, it's not just about you. We have to, I have to, you have to be looking at not just your intentions, but also how are my behaviors impacting others. And many, many, many times, 99.9% times in relationships, our intention is never to hurt. That doesn't mean our behaviors are not hurting the ones that we love. Number 4, it helps us to be compassionate. Seeing the world through someone else's eyes will allow you to be a more compassionate person. When you can connect with your significant others and see for yourself what they have to go through, sometimes on a daily basis, you will understand why they are the way they are, right? This in turn will give you insight in how you can make their world a better place and yours along with it. We can definitely do with more compassion in many of our relationships and of course in this world. And even as followers of Jesus, we know the Bible says people will in the last days, the love of many will grow cold. And we have to ensure that our love is not growing cold. We have a source for love, which is God. We have a source for compassion and mercy, which is God. So we can continue to ask him to download that into us, even while others may not be compassionate, right? Number 5, empathy makes us feel connected, closer, and understood. When your parent, your friend, right, your spouse, feel like you get or understand their feelings, of course, they feel closer, they feel understood, they feel heard. Generally, relationships where a spouse, a parent, a child, a friend does not feel heard, what is lacking is empathy. And a lack of empathy has been the cause of many separations and breakdowns of relationship. So again, empathy is necessary for a healthy relationship. And once you see you continually feeling unheard in a relationship, empathy is lacking. It is lacking. Number 6, you want to communicate more, and it makes communication easier and more meaningful. So empathy makes us feel connected. It makes us feel closer and understood. And who would not want to communicate with someone who they believe really understands them? So a lot of times, and when I do part 2, we'll be looking at this. When a loved one shares something with you, especially where you feel there are positive or painful emotions involved, let your first response be one of empathy. They start to feel like, okay, I can really share. I don't feel attacked. I don't feel like you're coming in here. I'm so powerless. I can't solve my problem. I feel heard. So empathy is not an option if you want healthy, intimate relationships, right? It's not an option. The skill of empathy is a must. And of course, some of us are naturally better at empathy than others. Some of us have to truly work on it. We have to work on our listening skills. We have to work on listening where we don't get defensive or where we don't go into problem-solving mode. Yeah. So 6 reasons why empathy is very important, right? It helps us to have healthy conflict resolution. You cannot resolve conflicts in an intimate relationship if we don't start with empathy. Secondly, empathy helps us to understand or loved ones. Third, it helps you to work on your flaws. It's not all about you. Even though it's not your intention, we can be hurting others with our behaviors. We need to be willing to put ourselves in the other's shoes and see through their eyes so we can make changes to have healthier relationships. Empathy helps us to be compassionate, number 4. Number 5, empathy makes us feel connected, closer, and understood. And 6, you want to communicate more, and it makes communication easier and more meaningful. Now, we have these 2 words, empathy and sympathy, and they are different. So empathy means experiencing someone else's feelings, and it comes from the German word meaning feeling into. So I'm feeling into. It requires an emotional connection. So empathy is not just a cognitive thing. It's not just a cognitive thing. So you have people that sometimes we call them dark empaths, where cognitively they can identify a person's feelings, but there is no heart component to that. There's no emotional component to that. So they could use that ability, right, the dark empaths, to manipulate people, because people think they get me, but then you can see in their behaviors, no, this is all about them and not about me, right? So empathy requires an emotional component of really feeling what the other person is feeling. And you can see how that can be difficult, because sometimes you don't want to feel what the other person is feeling. You don't, right? Sympathy, on the other hand, means understanding someone else's suffering. So you can see it as suffering, and I understand. So it is more cognitive in nature, and it is it keeps you at a distance. So people may hear a loved one died and they say, accept my sympathy. That's something that's cognitive, that is more at a distance, right? So that is different. Now, many relationships do not have difficulties regarding a lack of empathy from a spouse or parent or friend surrounding what I would call the larger life events, like the death of a parent or even the loss of a job. You find persons would come in, they would, give support, or bring food for you. They will do things that show that they empathize and that they understand and try to be there and help. The problems are actually caused from a lack of empathy in what we may look at as smaller issues. And we all know that when it comes to relationships, especially even marriages, the smaller issues are actually the big issues, because they really become big issues over time. So, example, your spouse loves to garden and you have absolutely no love or desire for gardening, none. The weather has been bad for most of the month and your spouse has not been able to go into the garden or to do the thing that he or she loves. As a result, they get a little bit depressed, right? Sad, a little bit moody. What do? Can you empathize with his or her feelings? You can see no reason on earth why he or she should be sad, right? Or even depressed about this. After all, who gets depressed if you can't go in the garden or you can't do gardening? Who does that, right? If you ignore your partner's feelings, or worse yet, get annoyed with their sadness, you are not being empathetic, right? You say you have put yourself in their shoes and you feel nothing for not being able to do gardening. If anything, you feel happy, right? You cannot understand why your partner feels so badly. Why can't they just read a book, which you love to do, play with the dog, or just enjoy the rainy weather, which you love, right? You just cannot see why he or she has to be so sad over something that just does not matter. So of course, we could see how that is not empathy. So, you know, it raining, children still go outside and play. And well, okay, well, let me just say some children do. So it raining, they can't go outside with their friends to ride or to play. And of course, they feel sad. And your parents say, I don't understand what you're sad for. It has so much thing to do in this house. Right? And we know we could be like that as parents, right? Because to us, yeah, if you miss playing one evening, no, the world wouldn't stop. But that's not how children see it, though. So sometimes they may not be able to go out and play, but at least we could empathize and let them know, we could know how this feels. But let's think of some other options. And you find in just being able to empathize, it is easier for them then to let's think of some other options. Of course, we know we have so many things inside now. We're not really outside people too much. So that is not empathy. That is not empathy there. Rick Hansen, clinical psychologist, and Jan Hansen, she's a nutritionist, shared what they call empathy blockers. And empathy blockers are really anything that we say that will shut down empathy or cause a person in a real sense to feel disconnected or sometimes wish they never even said anything to you. So a friend says, I am so upset because I was late for school. So we're just using that as the example. I'm so upset because I was late for school, right? Some typical responses are often said with the best intention. So again, not at all judging anybody's intentions, because I think most of us, especially followers of Jesus, our intentions are good. It doesn't mean our behaviors don't hurt others, right? And the intentions are important. So I'm not minimizing intentions. Intentions are important, right? So some of these responses, best intentions, but can unknowingly create distance and disconnection. So what are these empathy blockers? You have one-upping. That's an empathy blocker. So the friend says, I'm so upset because I was late for school. And what does one-upping look like? You say, I was late myself the other day. I had a long wait for the bus. You know, you share something with somebody, and instead of offering empathy, they tell you their story, which, you know, well, yes, that happened to me last week. And da-da-da-da-da. And, oh, okay, all right then. Okay, here we go. Right? And it's like, I should not have said anything, because then it becomes about the other person. So the whole one-upping, well, you know, I have a story too. Then we have another empathy blocker, which is advising and fixing. And we're good at this. So our friend says, I'm so upset because I was late for school. Advising and fixing says, maybe you should get up earlier. And you're thinking in your mind, I think I know that. And I already beaten up on myself for getting up this late. Didn't really need to hear that. Yeah. So I'm not sharing with you. So you see how it could cause disconnect. Then we also have educating. So the friend says, I'm so upset because I was late for school. Educating, an empathy blocker. You know, there are more than one bus line that you can take. So wonderful. I could see how that is helpful, but not the first response, right? Not the first response, because of course, right, why didn't I think of that? Yeah, boy, okay. So apart from feeling upset, I'm feeling a little stupid now. And then we have analyzing, right? So the friend says, I'm so upset because I was late for school. Analyzing is, it seems like you're always late for first period. Right? Thanks, eh? Right? So another empathy blocker. You have consoling. So a friend says, I'm so upset because I was late for school. And this is one we do. So consoling is, well, what can you do? You tried your best. And people feel like if you're feeling sorry for them. And most people really don't appreciate people feeling sorry for them. You know why? Because we are all powerful beings and we can make changes. So though consoling sounds like a good response, it's really not the best response. And then we have discounting. So a friend says, I'm so upset because I was late for school. Discounting. You should be glad the school is so close to your home. Like did you really hear what I said? So it's almost like My feelings are not valid. They're not invalidated, because I should be glad the school is so close to home. So you're discounting my feeling of being upset, right? So what does empathy look like? A friend says, I'm so upset because I was late for school. Empathy is, so you feel disappointed, and that is why you're upset. Simple, right? Simple empathetic response. And we'll go into more of that in our next program. Many of us use empathy blockers with no bad intention, right? No bad intention. And many of us do not even know that we're doing something wrong. But empathy blockers can cause the person who shared with you how they felt to feel judged, to feel sorry that they shared in the first place, and it may make them rethink if it makes sense to share feelings with you. Remember that sharing feelings is being vulnerable. It's actually one of the most vulnerable spaces in terms of human interaction, really sharing how you feel. And no one wants to be vulnerable, and another person's action says that your feelings don't matter, right? So we need to be watching out for those empathy blockers. And let me see if I could just say them again. So one-upping, somebody tells you something, oh gosh, let it be about them, Don't share your story. Yeah, we know you have a similar story. You can't share it after you've empathized, right? Advising, educating, analyzing, consoling, discounting, all empathy blockers. The following is a common statement. My husband and I communicate well enough on the surface, but I feel we are drifting apart deep down. I, for one, don't feel like he understands me that much. The basis, again, of emotional closeness in a relationship is empathy. The foundation of the experience of we, rather than just I or you. Empathy, you feel like we are in this. If you sense that your partner really feels how it is for you, of course you feel closer, you feel trusting, right? Fundamentally, empathy is a skill like any other, and you can get better at it. You can ask your partner to get better at it also. Listen, we're going to start doing this. We're going to be a little more empathetic. Empathy is not agreement or approval. I'm repeating that. Empathy does not mean I agree or I approve. It is I understand. I can understand what you feel without agreeing with your thinking or behavior or even your position, right? So Dr. Kelly Flanagan, a clinical psychologist, shared from his own experience why it is difficult to empathize with the person we have promised to love, and he shared 5 reasons. 1, I don't want to go first. So in empathy, when we're empathizing, somebody has to go first, right? So in any relationship, both members need empathy. But at any given moment in time, empathy is unidirectional. Somebody has to go first, right? And it can only flow in one direction at a time. So somebody has to be willing to, okay, let me really listen. While I want empathy too, or I want empathy also, let me just really listen and hear, right? Someone has to be willing to meet the needs of the other before his or her own needs are met. Secondly, I don't agree with you. I don't agree with you. This could make empathy difficult, right? Empathy requires us to place ourselves in another person's shoes, to allow our hearts to beat to the rhythm of theirs. We often fundamentally disagree with their perspective, and so we are tempted to debate them intellectually rather than join them emotionally. And it's an intimate relationship. So the first thing, we want to feel heard and understood. We're not here for debate. I could do that somewhere else, right? I could debate with somebody on social media. I could debate with somebody on my job, right? I want to join with you emotionally, not have a debate, an intellectual debate. Number 3, what if I get it wrong? So you're concerned about getting it wrong. When we try to place ourselves squarely inside of someone else's emotional landscape, it can be a little scary, right? It may be unfamiliar territory. They are inviting us in, but what about if we get it wrong? The thing with empathy, getting it wrong is not such a big deal, because just the fact that you're trying to hear me, to hear what I'm feeling, not judging me, not trying to solve a problem, that alone feels good. And most times we are able to identify at least one thing that our loved one is feeling, right? So empathy can be terrifying if you are a perfectionist. So if you always want to get things right and things perfect, or there's that perfectionism inside of you, empathy can be frightening. But you have to remember, we don't have to get it all right. And that's why we have that feedback question. Is that what you're feeling? So if it isn't, the person could say, well, it's not exactly that, it's this. But just the fact that you're trying to understand and hear what they're feeling is so healing. And lastly, it is not my job to fix you. We confuse empathy with fixing. We think we have to do something to take the emotion away. And we don't want to be put in that hot seat. So some of us will have the opposite reaction. I am going to fix you. But this undermines our ability to provide empathy, because empathy is not fixing, empathy is joining. And most times we know what we need to do. We don't want somebody to solve problems, and we have to know too, and this is where we have to have a balance. Men are natural problem solvers. So if you share a situation with a male loved one, they naturally would want to give you a solution. And we have to be able to appreciate that and give affirmation for that. But also to where for males, they have to understand, okay, in my intimate relationships, so in work and wherever, I can do this in my intimate relationships. I want to start with empathy, and then we can move on to problem solving. And the person in the relationship has to show appreciation for their male's loved one desire to solve problems and to give solutions to problems, because it's a part of how men are wired. And so it's not something that they could just change, right? Self-awareness and a non-judgmental attitude are needed before you can properly empathize with someone. Look to God for the strength to be less selfish and more understanding, and you're well on your way to connecting better with your loved ones. So in the next program, I would be sharing on how to communicate empathy. So I will close there. What you can do, you can WhatsApp me on 329-7383.